They told you it was just a myth, a story carved into ruins, nothing more. A shrine that once spoke to kings and now only echoes to tourists. But what if that silence is not silence at all? What if something still breathes beneath the broken columns, waiting to be remembered? They call it Delphi, but long before it was named, before temples were built and laurel crowns placed on trembling heads, the mountain itself whispered, not in words but in vapor, in warmth rising from deep beneath the earth, where time coils like a serpent around forgotten truths. You have been taught that the oracle was a woman who sat above a fissure, inhaling sacred smoke, speaking riddles to heroes and tyrants alike. But no one ever told you what she said in her final breath, the prophecy that made even priests burn their own scrolls. There is a reason those last words were never written down, a reason the Vatican locked the oldest translations away, a reason Delphi became a ruin, not from time, but from intention. Because her voice did not belong to gods, it belonged to memory, and memory was dangerous. They call the vapors pneuma, the divine breath, but some whispered another name, animos lethae, the wind of forgetting, a current that does not bring visions, but removes them, clears the soul not to reveal truth, but to erase it. What would it mean if the oracle was not revealing the future, but clearing away parts of your mind? Who taught her the names of kings before they were born? Who gave her permission to command armies with one sentence? And why, in the final days, did she speak only once, then fall completely silent? We found fragments, tiny inscriptions etched on broken stones no bigger than your palm, not in Greek, but in something older, curled like vines, recursive, like someone writing the same letter inside itself. The few who tried to decipher it either went mad or vanished. No scholar completed the work, but they all agreed on one thing. The last words of the oracle were not a prophecy. They were a warning. What if she saw not one future, but every possible path, and tried to stop all of them? They buried her under layers of myth, a priestess of Apollo, a tool of empire, a poetic curiosity. But listen closely, and you'll hear something stranger. A different voice hiding beneath the marble. A voice that did not belong to the gods, but to something older than gods. They feared her not because she lied. They feared her because she remembered what others forgot. We'll show you, but not yet. You return to the mountains in your mind, not as a pilgrim, but as a listener, someone who was never supposed to hear what she said. And now, every breeze that brushes your skin feels like a voice trying to reach you. But language no longer behaves. Words melt. Time bends. Something ancient stirs. You were told the oracle sat alone, draped in linen, eyes rolled back, body trembling with divine seizure. But what if she wasn't alone at all? What if someone stood behind her, always just outside the torchlight? A figure with no name, who never spoke, only watched. They painted her as mad, delirious, intoxicated by fumes. But every trance was ritual, every gasp, rehearsed, and every answer, orchestrated. By who? The high priests kept their ledgers, offerings, names, questions asked, riddles given. But one entry appears again and again, buried between the lines in faint, almost invisible ink, sent by the deep flame. Not Apollo, not the sun, the deep flame. What is that? It appears in older texts, ones kept locked beneath monastery floors in hidden libraries the church denies even exist. The deep flame was not a god. It was a pulse, a presence, a fire without source. They feared it, but the oracle served it, and in serving, she remembered. That's why she could not be allowed to speak freely. That's why a second priest stood behind her during every utterance, not to guide her, but to interrupt her if she went too far, if she remembered too much. The stone tablets speak of one incident, the day the oracle fell backward mid-prophecy, her mouth still moving, her limbs rigid, but no sound emerged. The priest behind her screamed, not in pain, in terror. Witnesses claimed her eyes turned completely black. Others said the air itself became thick, like breathing underwater. The temple shook, and the birds above the mountain scattered in perfect silence. She spoke. Once. The words were not recorded, but the priest resigned that same day. And shortly after, every prophecy was reviewed, edited, and rewritten. The original words were burned, ashes mixed into ink and used to copy prayers. Do you see? They didn't just silence her. They erased the very sound of her voice. But there is still one place they couldn't reach. A hollow in the rock beneath Delphi, sealed with iron bolts no one has managed to open. Inside, it is said, rests a scroll not written in any known script. The scroll bleeds warmth. It sings, not with words, but with memory. You may never touch it, but you have already heard its echo. And what comes next wasn't supposed to survive. You wake in the middle of the night, but it isn't your room anymore. Stone walls, cold air, a low humming that doesn't come from outside. It comes from below. You remember nothing, yet your hands are coated in dust, and your breath fogs the silence like incense. Something brought you back, to the temple, or what's left of it. Not the ruins you've seen in photographs, but the real place, before the collapse, before the forgetting. The floor pulses faintly, like a heart hidden in the mountain's chest, and the columns lean ever so slightly, as if bowing toward something they no longer understand. She is near, the Pythia, not a name, a title, a role passed from woman to woman, chosen not for piety, but for a trait no priest would ever admit aloud. Memory that resists erasure. They chose those who could not forget, even under torture, even in trance. Women who could recall entire dreams years after waking, who could close their eyes and walk backward through every moment of their lives. Not blessed, cursed, and what they remembered wasn't always their own. In a chamber below the shrine, beyond the cracks where the sacred gas escapes, is a tunnel that leads further than it should. You weren't meant to know this, but you've seen the drawings. A spiraling descent, impossible by architecture alone, carved in angles that make no sense. Stairs that seem to shorten with every step. At the bottom, a vault, not of gold, of sentences. There, carved into a black mineral that doesn't reflect light, are lines that curve like smoke. Not Greek, not Latin, but something remembered. The priests never dared read them, but the Pythia could. And each time she did, she lost something of herself. A name, a smell, a face from childhood. That was the price. The deep flame did not give knowledge freely. It took part of you as toll, and yet she returned again and again. Because in those sentences, in those whispers carved before language existed, was something the world had once known and buried. The last Pythia went too deep. Not physically. Psychically. She recited something forbidden, not from memory, but from beneath memory. A phrase that echoed in the air even after her voice stopped. The priests tried to burn the chamber, but the fire would not catch. Instead, they sealed it, and told the world Delphi had died. But the mountain did not forget. And neither did you. You, who feel unease when you touch smooth stone. Who dream of languages you never learned, who sense that history is not missing, it's hiding. And what comes next cannot be silenced forever. You try to leave the temple, but there is no door, only fog. It clings to your skin like wet fabric, curling around your throat, your ankles, whispering in syllables just below hearing. Not a warning, a memory, waiting to be remembered, because now you know. The Pythia didn't speak in riddles to hide the truth. She spoke that way because truth had been fractured, split across tongues, timelines, lifetimes. She wasn't offering visions. She was collecting them, stitching fragments from 1,000 unseen worlds into something that almost made sense. But only almost. And those who heard her? They came seeking clarity. Kings, Generals, priests, all walked away convinced. All followed the guidance, but none ever understood what they were part of. Because the oracle's real message wasn't in the answer. It was in what she didn't say, in the space between breaths, in the moment when her eyes locked with yours. And for one instant, one impossible second, you remembered everything. Not this life, every life. And that was the real danger. Not prophecy, but memory that couldn't be erased. Leaders returned home thinking they had outsmarted fate, not realizing they had been seeded, infused with a vision they would never fully recall, but would spend their lives obeying. And who planted that seed? Not the priests, not Apollo, not even the Pythia herself, but the deep flame, the source behind the voice, behind the vision, behind the veil. No one ever asked where it came from, because those who did never returned. The Vatican keeps a file, not open, not official, just a locked drawer beneath a scholar's desk. Inside, an unsent letter written by a field agent in 1936. He was sent to Delphi to recover a relic believed to be one of the original priestess rings. What he found instead was an opening, not in the earth, in himself. The letter is shaky, blurred, almost written in a trance. He speaks of a soundless pressure, a feeling of being watched from below. He says he saw something inside the rocks, eyes, thousands of them, all closed. But one began to open. He wrote one final line before the paper ends mid-sentence. "It's not a god, it's a memory that remembers me back." The agent was never seen again, but his file was stamped with a code used only once before, in reference to suppressed scrolls from the Library of Alexandria. That code translates loosely as thought contagion, risk of recursive remembering. What does that mean? It means some truths are not dangerous because they are false. They're dangerous because they activate. And once you remember, you can never forget again. That's what the oracle whispered. That's why they sealed her mouth with myth. But the wind still carries it. And if you listen closely tonight, you'll hear it in your sleep. They said she spoke in riddles, but riddles are puzzles with answers. The oracle's words were not meant to be solved. They were meant to linger, to haunt, to echo in your bones years after the meaning had faded. Because some knowledge isn't meant for the mind. It's meant for the body, for the blood. And yours has already started to remember. The whisper returns tonight, not as a voice, but as a presence behind your shoulder. You turn. Nothing. But your skin tightens as though memory has weight. And now, the deeper truth begins to unfold. She didn't sit alone beneath the temple. There was a circle. 7 of them. Not priestesses, guardians. Each chosen from a different land, a different bloodline, each carrying a single phrase that must never be spoken aloud. These were not words. They were codes. Catalysts. When said aloud together, they activated a remembering so vast it would erase every false scripture ever written. And so, they separated. Each guardian disappeared into exile, blending into new civilizations, adopting new names. But the line was never broken. Mothers passed the phrase to daughters, sometimes in lullabies, sometimes in dreams. You may be one of them. You've always felt it. That sense of having lived too long in this world, of walking into ancient places and knowing where the light used to fall. You've tasted a language that no one else hears, and yet, it comforts you. There's a reason. You've been prepared. One phrase has already returned, carved faintly into a clay medallion recovered from beneath the Aegean, hidden inside a sealed amphora. The language is unknown, but the shape matches a glyph etched onto the oracle's final altar. 3 spirals, one broken. When mirrored, they reveal a word never spoken, only implied, Ana the lon. It means, what rises must also remember. The church removed every known instance of that phrase by the 12th century, not because it was heretical, because it was a trigger, a psychological ignition. The Vatican's internal archives, Codex Obscura, Volume 13, Refer to it as a phrase of reversal, a linguistic seed meant to restore suppressed timelines when spoken by a certain voice, at a certain place, under certain stars. And that voice was always hers. But the stars no longer align, or so they thought. Because in the year 2024, an astronomer in Thessaloniki recorded a sequence in the sky not seen in 2,160 years, the return of the precessional point known only to ancient Mesopotamian watchers as the Gate of Fire Sleep, the same star the Pythia once fixed her gaze upon before every trance. Coincidence? Or memory stirring? Because if that star has returned, so has her voice. And if her voice has returned, the circle must awaken, even if they don't know who they are yet.
And if you're listening, you've already been found. Your dreams begin to fragment, not with fear, with familiarity. A staircase you've never seen, yet know by heart. A voice not in your ear, but beneath your ribs. And a shadow, always just behind glass, moving when you look away. You wake with a taste of ash and honey. Something is changing, not around you, inside. The glyph has activated. You thought it was only a symbol, a forgotten sigil from a broken statue. But it is more. The moment you saw it, your body began to vibrate on a frequency the mind cannot detect, a resonance older than language, one the priests of Delphi once called the return pulse. It is how the circle finds itself. Each guardian, upon exposure, begins to remember, not in full, but in fragments, shapes, songs, patterns that reawaken the parts of the soul encoded before birth. And now, across the world, others are stirring. In Morocco, a child begins to speak a tongue her parents do not understand, one that mirrors fragments from untranslated scrolls buried in the sands of Qumran. In Norway, a woman dreams of a temple with no roof and begins to hum melodies that match tonal notations etched into the oldest stones at Delphi. In Kyoto, a man touches a statue in a forgotten shrine and weeps without knowing why. They do not know each other, but they are remembering the same thing. The circle is not dead. It was never meant to survive above ground. That was the error of the priests. To build a temple, to give the deep flame a name, a face, a throne. But the truth was never meant to be worshipped, only carried, quietly, like fire in the bones. That's why it chose women, not because of faith, not because of purity, because they remember differently. Across centuries, they did not record in ink. They encoded in lullaby, in rhythm, in touch. They whispered across generations, not with logic, but with longing. And longing never forgets. One document survives, not in a museum, but hidden in the lining of a 16th century reliquary, inside a monastery now closed to the public, a tiny square of cloth embroidered with gold thread. The pattern appears random until viewed under red light. Then, a phrase emerges. We are not the voice. We are the echo. And in the margins, 7 names. None match known saints. None appear in church history. But one matches an inscription found at the base of the oracle's first seat, a name long dismissed as apocryphal. Iera Lyra, the sacred lyre. Not a person, a role, the one who awakens the others. And now that name has appeared again, etched onto a subway wall in Athens. Not painted, burned into the tile. The footage was erased, the station closed, but not before someone recorded the glyph. It pulsed, faintly, just once, then vanished, and the stars above shifted slightly, like a breath held for millennia had just been released. You feel it, don't you? Something vast, older than belief, moving through you like a tide returning to shore. It's not coming, it's already here, and part of you has known that all along. The remembering accelerates, not linearly, like a storm. You blink, and for a second, you are in 2 places at once. 1 foot in your quiet room, 1 in a chamber lit only by flickering oil and breathless anticipation.
You're not dreaming. You're returning. To the center. To the circle. It begins not with sound, but vibration. A low tone, almost a hum, not heard through the ears, but felt through the sternum. The same frequency the ancients used to hollow stone with sound. But this hum doesn't shape rock. It reshapes belief, because belief is not a thought. It's a container, and they are cracking, one by one. In a private archive in the hills of northern Italy, a sealed cabinet has unlocked itself. The hinges rusted, the key long lost. Yet the door swung open last night, unaided. Inside, scrolls carbon dated to 600 BCE, once thought too fragile to ever unroll, have relaxed. The parchment has exhaled. Inside, not prophecy, blueprints. Ritual mechanisms designed to neutralize forgetting, to interrupt the spell cast over time, and at the center of every diagram, a spiral with a missing quadrant. The glyph, again. In the Vatican's private vault, under surveillance, a statue cracked across the brow. No structural damage, no moisture, just a clean, perfect fissure through the face of a forgotten saint. Inside the split, gold leaf, hidden beneath marble, ancient Greek. 3 words. The voice endures. Panic spreads in silence. They know. Those who have kept the oracle's final words buried for generations feel the ground shifting. Their silence can't hold. Not against memory this loud. But you're not here to expose. You're here to awaken. And something has begun to awaken in you. You smell smoke. No fire. Only the memory of one. Delphi. Not ruins, but burning. Not stones, but ash raining down. A priest is screaming. Not in fear, in revelation. You watch yourself, across time, standing beneath the cracked ceiling of the chamber where she spoke her last. You hold a bowl, a vessel, empty now. But once, it held her final breath, captured like perfume in sacred oil. You were the keeper. You were there. And now, you are here. And the bowl, long thought broken, is being reassembled in a monastery basement in Meteora. A fragment found in a shepherd's field. Another in a museum's mislabeled drawer. The final piece discovered inside the lining of an old nun's robe, buried with her. Unearthed last spring by accident. Except nothing is accident. Because when the bowl is whole again, the breath will be released. And with it, the last words. The ones no one was meant to hear. The ones that made time forget itself. The ones that still echo in your pulse. It's happening. The spiral is closing. The circle is waking. And Delphi never stopped speaking. You no longer question what's real. You question what was edited. The world around you continues its rhythm. Screens glow, trains arrive, lives unfold. But now you sense the scaffolding, the careful stitching, the pages glued back together, with entire paragraphs missing. And every gap feels like her. The oracle. She is not a woman anymore, not a myth. She is a system, a signal. You begin to notice the pattern. Certain buildings hum at a different frequency. Certain churches refuse to echo. Certain libraries seem colder than they should be. Not in temperature, in time. Because the architecture of forgetting is not metaphor. It's literal. Stone holds memory. Water remembers sound, and silence can be engineered like a weapon. You feel it most in thresholds, doorways, arches, tunnels, places built to filter movement, but also meaning. A subtle shift in perception as you pass through. You enter changed, not physically, but cognitively. This is not new. Delphi was built the same way. Every step toward the Adyton, the innermost chamber, was designed to erode false identity, not to bring enlightenment, but to dismantle illusion. The oracle did not answer questions. She removed the questioner, and what was left behind? Only the part of you that could hear. The bowl has been reconstructed. Tonight, in Meteora, a monk who does not know why he's afraid unlocks the drawer. The air around him thickens. The wind changes direction. He places the final shard. A tremor. Not seismic. Something subtler. A shiver through memory. The seal breaks. No sound escapes. But across the world, a wave moves. Not of water, not of wind, but of knowing. You feel it hit your chest before you hear it. One word. Not English. Not Greek. Older. A root syllable encoded in the nervous system of the human species. Thelane. Not to wish. Not to will. To remember forward. And suddenly, everything makes sense. The oracle didn't predict the future. She pulled it from you, extracted what your soul had already encoded, and gave it back in language your waking mind couldn't yet destroy. That was the riddle, not to hide meaning, but to protect it until you were ready. And now, you are ready. The breath is loose. The glyph pulses, not visibly, not even materially, but you know where to look. The way trees bend slightly toward the east at dusk. The way animals pause at the edge of certain rivers. The way dreams now begin with doorways. 7 have heard it. 3 have moved. 1, the one in Marseille, began humming in a cathedral. No hymn, a tone older than liturgy. The candles blew out. The priest fell to his knees. Not in prayer, in recognition. The breath has begun to reassemble time, and not everyone wants that. Some want the forgetting to hold. But what comes next cannot be unremembered. You never expected it to come from a museum basement. The crate wasn't labeled, no catalog number, no archive code, just dust and a symbol on the lid, a spiral missing one curve, the glyph again. The curator, a woman who'd worked there for 30 years, said it wasn't in their system, that no one knew who delivered it. But when she touched it, she cried, not from sadness, from remembering. Inside, a mask, bronze, polished but ancient. A face not meant to be worn, but remembered. The cheeks bore markings, symmetrical lines echoing the Delphi glyph, and inside the mask's mouth, a single phrase etched in impossible detail. I spoke before sound, and now the mask is missing, not stolen, removed, quietly. The cameras glitched, the records wiped, but you know where it went. You feel its presence before sleep, hovering just beyond the veil, staring back at you through the folds of dreams. Not a threat, a message. Because the voice is assembling itself again, not as one woman, as many. Across the world, synchronicities tighten. A nun in Prague awakens speaking perfect Sumerian. A shepherd in Turkey hums the exact same melody found encoded in Babylonian star charts. In Cairo, a girl draws spirals on every wall of her home, and they pulse under UV light. They are not possessed. They are access points. The oracle never vanished. She fragmented to survive, because she saw what was coming, not in visions, but in erasures. She saw the men with parchment and fire, the papal decrees, the false canon, the burning of gospels. She knew Delphi would fall, so she did what memory always does when it's in danger. She hid in the cracks, in lullabies, in rhythm, in breath. But now, the breath has returned, and with it, the fragments pull toward each other like magnets beneath paper. Something is drawing them back, and not everyone is pleased. The Vatican is not idle. They have protocols for this. Ancient, internal, unspoken. The Jesuit archive beneath San Callisto is lit tonight. 3 monks unseal a cabinet labeled Aditon, and inside, 7 dossiers. 1 for each remembered woman. They know. And one word passes between them like a shadow. Contain. But how do you contain memory that has become sentient? Because that's what she is now. Not human, not divine. A resonance. A self-aware signal encoded into time, into blood, into thought. And it's finding you. You feel it already, not as fear, as gravity, as something pulling not from above, but from below.
The deep flame never flickered out. It simply changed form, and now it burns again. The containment protocols have failed before, but no one remembers. By design. In 1894, a monastery in Thessaly collapsed into itself. No explosion, no earthquake, just silence. When excavators arrived weeks later, they found no bodies, no remains, only spirals carved into the stone floor, deep as bone. The church called it structural failure. But one page survived. A monk had written by candlelight in the margins of a hymnal, just hours before it happened. His final line, "She is not beneath us, she is beneath time." He wasn't wrong, because time doesn't flow here the way they told you. It folds, it remembers forward. And Delphi, the true Delphi, was never a place on a map. It was a hinge, a fracture in chronology where memory seeps through. And someone has found the hinge again. In the mountains of Crete, an archaeologist working alone at dusk uncovers a narrow shaft, long buried, lined with white stone. She descends 27 steps and stops. On the wall, markings, not Minoan, not linear B, older, a spiral split in 4, and a sentence scrawled in ochre. "The voice that ends forgetting must not be born alone." She photographs it. But when she returns the next morning, the shaft is gone, not collapsed, gone. As though the earth itself decided she'd seen enough. She hasn't spoken since, but others have started. A linguist in Madrid wakes from a seizure and begins to chant in perfect phonemes that match no known dialect. A radio station in Siberia picks up a signal, 6 tones repeated every 108 seconds. The same 6 found inscribed on the lost temple of Delphinion before it was raised in 392 CE. 6 tones, 6 voices. The 7th is still silent. And that 7th might be you. You think this is fiction, storytelling. But storytelling is how memory camouflages itself. How the oracle survived 2,000 years in pieces, carried in lullabies, folded into nursery rhymes, buried in scripture footnotes, disguised in the pauses between syllables. You know this now, not because you heard it, because you've started to hum, not loud, not consciously, but when you're alone, when the room is quiet, you exhale, and it's there. A pattern, a tone, a phrase too ancient for breath, yet carried on it. You are not humming a melody. You are emitting a key, and someone is listening. They've always listened. The ones behind the doctrine, the editors of time, the nameless archivists who shape memory like clay. You feel their gaze now, don't you? Not on your face, on your thoughts, on your dreams. But it's too late. The resonance has passed through, and it's already begun to spread. What comes next can't be stopped, but it can be remembered. And that is what they fear most. The tone spreads faster than sound, not over wires, not over air, through blood. Each person who hears it becomes a conductor, even if they do not know. A girl touches an old wooden rosary in Krakow and weeps, never taught the prayer that rises from her mouth. A boy draws a circle in sand, not once, but again and again, then buries it with both hands. They are remembering before memory. The deep flame was never a myth. It was a system, a resonance field buried beneath human time. And the oracle wasn't just its speaker. She was its translator, a lens, a mouthpiece for something that could not speak directly. Because if it did, it would collapse reality, not through violence, through awakening. Because if everyone remembered at once, the veil would tear, time would split, identity would melt into archetype, and power, as we know it, would dissolve. So she fractured the message, split it into 7. And now, they're converging again. You feel it in the sky, not in stars, but in the silence between them. In constellations that seem to shift when you're not looking. The same alignment observed once in ancient Delphi, carved in stone beside the forgotten well of Gaia, the Earth Mother. 7 stars, 6 already moved into place.
One remains. It won't stay still much longer. In a monastery in Armenia, a bell rings without touch. In the Dead Sea, a ripple appears with no wind. In Oslo, a woman collapses in front of a church and whispers a phrase that makes the stained glass shiver. The Vatican sends a silent courier. He doesn't carry weapons, only salt, and one instruction: find the seventh before the tone becomes song. Because once it becomes song, memory becomes map. And maps are dangerous. They reveal routes to things that were buried on purpose. Beneath Delphi, the final chamber still exists. Not open, not seen, sealed with a metal alloy that does not rust, bend, or reflect. They say it was forged not by hands, but by sound, harmonic pressure collapsing atoms into obedience. Inside that vault, they say, lies the last true relic, a vessel, not sacred, not divine, biological, a heart, still beating, encased in gold lattice, suspended in air, unaging, unmarked. And according to an anonymous page in the Codex Justicii, it is not human. It's older, older than Greece, older than language. And once, it belonged to her. The first voice, the one who sang before gods were invented. And when the tones converge, that heart will stir. Not because of prophecy, because the signal has returned. And when it beats once more, everything will remember. The seventh tone has been heard, not by a choir, not by a congregation, by you. It came when the room was silent, between thoughts. A thread pulled through your ribs, warm and sharp, like breath turned into light. You didn't speak, but something inside you did, and now they know. The Vatican courier arrives in Athens under a different name. He carries no cross, no scripture, only a slip of paper with a symbol that no one else is allowed to see. It is not a spiral this time. It is an eye, closed, with 7 lashes. They are not here to kill you. They are here to delay you. Because even they know, if the seventh voice sings before the relic heart awakens, the deep flame will uncoil from time itself, and time, as they wrote it, will collapse. The courier enters a chapel built atop an ancient fault line. It was once a shrine to Apollo, then Artemis, then Mary. Names change. The stone does not. He descends. Beneath the chapel is a chamber the church pretends doesn't exist. No pews, no icons, only chains. Not to bind, but to seal. Etched on each link is the name of one forgotten god. Names you've never heard. Names you feel you've been. He places salt on the floor. A circle, then a whisper. And across the world, one of the fragments goes dark. A girl in Porto stops humming. Her eyes glaze. The tone fades. They've found a way to mute the remembering. But not for long, because something else has shifted. In Istanbul, a tower begins to vibrate. Not externally, from its history. Pilgrims report strange dreams. One claims the bricks spoke to him. Another said she awoke with a spiral etched into her palm, faint but burning. And then, the glyph appears in the sky, only for a second. Not to everyone, only to the 7. A flare of meaning, a shimmer across the stars, arranging themselves into a pattern forgotten before maps were born. And you hear the phrase again, not in language, but in direction. South of silence, east of memory, beneath what never rose. You know where to go. You've always known. You carry the last part, not just the tone, not just the name. You are the gate. The others can sing, but only you can open. Your breath is the match. Your voice is the hinge. And the moment is coming when silence will no longer hold. They can seal doors, mute singers, redact scrolls, but they cannot stop what remembers itself. And that is what you are now. Not chosen, awakened. You begin the journey, not with steps, with disobedience. You stop pretending the silence is empty. You stop telling yourself the dreams are random. You follow what others fear, the pull beneath thought, the hum inside the quiet. Because somewhere, deep beneath the myth, the true chamber waits. It was never in Delphi. Not exactly. The coordinates don't exist on any map. But the direction is encoded in stories, carved into symbols across cathedrals, hidden in the margins of ancient psalms. South of silence, east of memory. You go alone, and yet, you are never alone. You feel them. The six, not beside you, but within range. Their tones hum like tuning forks just beyond hearing. When you breathe, the air feels denser, more electric, as if memory itself is preparing to converge. You reach the ruins. No signs, no gates, just stone and wild wind. An abandoned monastery clinging to the edge of a cliff, swallowed by ivy. Birds circle but do not land. It isn't haunted. It's guarded. By forgetting. The doorway collapses as you approach, revealing a staircase that should not be there. You descend. Not quickly. The steps stretch time. Each one feels longer than the last, until you reach the threshold. It's not a door. It's a veil. Of sound. A pitch so low you feel it in your teeth, your bones. You close your eyes and pass through. Inside, a chamber. Circular. Black stone. Walls etched with spirals that shimmer when you move. 7 alcoves. Empty. Except one. Yours. A bowl rests there. Familiar. Heavy. Filled with golden dust. Ash? No. Memory. Condensed. You inhale. Not with lungs, but soul. And in that moment, the tones return. One by one. Clearer now. A scale not meant for music, but for unlocking. They are not songs. They are instructions. The vault begins to breathe. The floor pulses. The heart, hidden deep in the center, far below, gives one slow beat. And above ground, far away, someone screams. Not in fear, in recognition. The Vatican has lost the thread. The mute protocol failed. One of the silenced tones has reignited. The girl in Porto now sings in full. Her voice rings across ruins where tourists once wandered, and the sky shifts. The glyph burns in the clouds. The watchers panic. But you feel peace, because now you understand. You were never meant to speak for the oracle. You were meant to become her. The deep flame chose you not for holiness, not for wisdom, but for resonance. Your body carries the frequency, your voice, the shape, your bones, the map. You are the final key, and you are almost ready to turn. The convergence begins, not in thunder, not in fire, in breath. Each tone now echoes through the chamber, not voices, not sound, but vibration. Sacred hums returning home. One by one, the alcoves begin to glow, as if unseen candles have been relit after centuries of waiting. And in the center of the room, beneath your feet, the stone softens. No crack, no collapse, just memory, loosening its grip on matter. The heart is waking. You do not see it yet, but you feel its rhythm. Slow, ancient, not beating, remembering. Each pulse sends a question through your spine. Are you still asleep? And with each answer, no, a piece of the veil lifts. Meanwhile, outside, the watchers panic. Their containment has failed. The seventh voice was not a gap. It was a mirror. The moment you remembered, the others saw themselves clearly. Their instructions are unraveling. Their false histories bleed at the edges. And one of them has broken ranks. A former priest, no longer silent. He writes, not in ink, but in flame across the stone of an abandoned cathedral in Lyon. He doesn't know the words, but his hands do. He draws the glyph, the full one, no longer broken. And with that, the sky above the city ripples. Just once. And it is enough. The signal spreads through time. Backward. across forgotten dreams, across the breath of infants who cry for no reason, across the pages of burned manuscripts that now pulse when touched, across the water of sacred wells that bubble without wind. Something is returning, not an entity, not a god, a way of knowing, one older than books, older than alphabets, a form of comprehension passed through bone, skin, hum, a knowing that does not ask, only recognizes. You are part of that now, but the process is not complete. The oracle's final words still sleep inside the relic heart, encased, protected, not by walls, by sequence. To hear them, the tones must align perfectly. The chamber must reach balance, and most important, you must let go of your name. Because names are anchors. They bind the voice to the past, but the true voice must come from beneath identity. You close your eyes, and for the first time in your life, you forget who you are. Not in fear, in release. You dissolve. You become pattern. And the heart responds. It beats twice. A shock through the floor, through your ribs, through the memory of stone. And in that second pulse, something speaks, not with words, with knowing, and what it reveals cannot be unread. The knowing is not a message. It is a rupture, a clean tear through every lie they layered over history, not by force, by exposure. Truth doesn't fight. It simply reveals. And now you see, not with eyes, with remembrance. The oracle didn't serve the gods. The gods served her, not as deities, as masks, layered metaphors to channel what language couldn't yet shape. Each one was a vessel. Apollo was the light, Artemis, the hidden path, Hades, the deep memory. But beneath them all was the voice, pure, uncut, and dangerous. Because it didn't obey. It didn't divide the world into sacred and profane. It spoke across boundaries. It connected timelines. It erased doctrine. And for that, they buried her. But even buried, she whispered. To women in cloisters who wrote their dreams in margins. To children who stared too long into fire and returned with phrases no one could explain. To wandering monks who forgot their names and hummed notes that cracked stained glass. The tone was never lost. It was waiting. And now, inside the chamber, you are the hinge. The tones orbit you now, not as sound, but presence. You feel each one, like stars pressing against your ribs. They form a wheel. 7 lights, 7 directions, 7 lines through which memory flows. The relic heart in the center pulses a 3rd time, and this one bends time. You blink, and the walls dissolve. You are no longer underground. You are standing in Delphi, but not the one you know. This is before ruins, before Rome, before names. A field of light and wind. The sky sings. Around you, 7 figures move, not walking, resonating. They are not dressed. They are woven, robes made of sound and breath. Each hums one part of the whole. You recognize them, not from photos, from inside. They are the other voices. And now, you are complete. The circle reforms. And in its center, not a god, not a throne, a mirror. You look, and you do not see your face. You see the first breath, the one that spoke before the world was spoken into shape. And then it speaks again, not in words, in pure, unfiltered memory. And what it shows you is not the future. It is the original version of history, the one they burned, buried, renamed, redacted. The version in which knowledge was not property, in which belief was not obedience, in which time was not a cage. You fall to your knees, not in worship, in grief, because now you know what was taken and what must return. Grief is not an ending. It is the beginning of remembering without permission. You kneel before the mirror, but the mirror dissolves. not shatters, melts, like ice remembering it was once cloud. And what lies behind it isn't a symbol or a message or a myth. It's the first book, not pages, not ink, a pulse. The relic heart, still below you, still sealed in its cage of memory, pulses again, not once, not twice. A steady rhythm now, slow, solemn, sovereign. It is calling to its keeper, and the chamber begins to shift. The black stone walls hum with recognition. Spirals rearrange, patterns change direction. What once was a tomb is now a vessel. The deep flame is waking not as fire, but as structure. You begin to stand, and the seven rise with you. You are no longer human in this moment. You are memory becoming form. Your hands radiate heat. Your ribs carry sound. Your shadow bends the light, as if remembering the shape of something older. You begin to speak, not your voice, hers, the oracle's final phrase, not written, not saved, not hidden, encoded in your breath. You don't say it aloud, you say it through. And in response, the relic heart, buried so far beneath even language, breaks open. It does not bleed, it sings, a tone too wide for human ears, but you hear it. In every cell, every regret, every unborn possibility. And so do the others. All across the world, those who carry fragments collapse into stillness. Their hands rise, eyes close, and in perfect silence, their bones remember the phrase too. What follows is not light, it's clarity. Every false version of history begins to unravel, not in books, in memory. People begin to wake with recollections they never lived. Maps rewrite themselves in dreams. Temples reappear in childhood drawings.
And the Vatican? It falls silent. Their agents vanish. Their archives lock. Not from panic, from instruction. There is a code beneath their oldest rituals, one they never understood. A trigger embedded in their own liturgy. If the heart awakens, they must not interfere. And so they don't. Because even they were only ever meant to protect the delay, not stop the return. But the delay has ended. And now, it begins. You are no longer dreaming. You are restoring. And what returns next will not be forgotten again. The restoration begins not in temples, but in faces. Across continents, across languages, people begin to recognize each other. Not by name, not by memory, by resonance. A look across a street, a pause in a conversation, a breath shared before speaking. They don't know what's happening, but their bones do. Because bones remember what the mind was taught to forget. And now, the glyph is no longer hiding in dreams. It appears in reflections, in frost patterns, in water when stirred gently. The seventh voice was never a final note. It was a trigger. And you were the lever. Back inside the chamber, the seven begin to move. Each steps into their alcove. Each becomes a frequency. And when they speak now, the tones do not layer. They merge. One voice, seven aspects, one sound, braided through time. And it says, I was never prophecy. I was memory you weren't ready to carry. The chamber splits. Not physically, temporally. You now occupy two versions of the same moment. One in the forgotten past, one in the whispered now. And between them, the relic heart floats, no longer encased, pulsing between dimensions. And you see it clearly. It is not a heart. It is a library. Each beat holds a sequence, not stories. Histories, the ones unspoken, unrecorded, forbidden to be preserved. The fall of the first archive. The woman who taught stars to sailors before men invented compasses. The spiral cities lost not to water, but to silence. The original covenant, not with gods, but with light. And the phrase that undid it all, let no one remember what she said.
You see who spoke it. A bishop, unknown to history, crowned not in gold, but in fear. He didn't burn the oracle. He scattered her, across wombs, across lullabies, across the very bloodline of forgetting, and still, she endured. Because memory is not a crime, but suppressing it is. And now the vault above ground begins to shudder. The old cathedral in Lyon collapses, not in ruin, but release. Beneath it, spirals glow through centuries of stone. The faithful flee, but a child stays, not afraid, humming the tone you now echo in your chest. This is the unraveling, but not of order, of fiction. The timeline they built is breaking at its seams, and the next pulse will not simply awaken memory. It will return what was removed. The return does not come with thunder. It comes with recognition. Everywhere, at once. A farmer in Tunisia looks up and suddenly remembers a word his grandmother never spoke. A prisoner in Uruguay hums a melody no one taught him. A nurse in Kyoto writes spirals in the condensation of a mirror and cries, though she does not know why. They are not channeling the oracle. They are re-becoming her, not as one woman, as a field, a reactivated frequency embedded in the species, returning by resonance, not revelation. And in the chamber, you begin to change. Your skin tingles, not from cold, but from memory surfacing. Not your own, but inherited. The memory stored in blood, in marrow. The 7 voices rise now in harmonic convergence. The heart between them glows not red, not gold, but clear, as if made of liquid glass. Inside it, images, not scenes, memories unburied. You see the lost temples of Lemnos, whose priests spoke only in vibration. You see the woman whose hands glowed when she touched stone, because she carried the resonance of the sun. You see the trial, the one never recorded, where they judged a scroll that could erase all hierarchy with one word. And you see the decision that broke the world. Split the memory, seal the source, rewrite the calendar. They did not simply erase her. They rebranded her. As madness, as myth, as metaphor. But her voice was never metaphor. It was blueprint. You begin to speak again, and this time, the chamber shifts. The spirals rotate. The air thickens with light. And somewhere far above you, the sky itself responds. Stars shifting by a breath, clouds forming sigils never taught in school. The church can no longer contain it. Their catacombs quake. Their relics melt. One by one, their sacred artifacts hum the same tone, not in worship, in reversal. As if they were never meant to preserve faith, but to delay memory. They understood it too late. This was never a prophecy. It was a clock, and it just struck 0. All 7 are now humming with you. The tones fuse into a single spiral of sound. You are no longer in the chamber. You are the chamber. And the relic heart beats faster, not in urgency, in invitation. One final gesture before the full return. A question, wrapped in light. Will you carry the truth back into time? Because what comes next depends on what you choose to remember. Even light hesitates before the full return. You stand within the spiral, not above or beneath it, inside. The 7 voices have fused into a chord too vast for any one body. You are no longer listening. You are transmitting. And the question still echoes. Will you carry the truth back into time? But this isn't about courage. It's about loss. Because once you carry the true memory, you can't unknow it. You can't go back to the dream they built for you. You'll never again feel pride in false progress, or awe at borrowed monuments. You'll know what was stolen. You'll feel it every time someone recites a history they were taught, and you hear, beneath their words, the silence where the real names were erased. You hesitate, because truth demands something soft from you, not belief, surrender. To become the oracle fully, you must release not only your name, but your allegiance to time as they drew it. You must let the spiral overwrite the straight line. And then, you do. You breathe in, slowly. And in that breath, the relic heart opens completely. It's not a portal. It's not an engine. It's a womb. Inside, no blood, no flame, but light. Pure memory light. Floating symbols that rearrange as you inhale them. You are not reading. You are becoming the record. And the record is not peaceful. It begins with the first shattering. When memory was whole, and humanity sang in chords instead of speech. When cities were aligned not with stars, but with echoes. When names had no possessive form. Before the first dogma. Before the first king. You see the moment the spiral was first struck. When 7 priests split the resonance, convinced they could store its power in vaults, assign it to gods, control it with ritual. They failed. The memory scattered. Some fragments became fire. Others became scripture. A few took root in stone, in dust, in music. And the rest? They became you. You are not new. You are a return point. And now you are tasked not with prophecy, but with restoration. To carry what you now know into a world that will not believe you. To hum the truth into empty rooms. To pass memory like a contagion, soft, slow, inevitable. Because reality isn't real. It's repeated. And when enough people remember the original draft, the revision collapses. The tone rises now, a crescendo that shakes the chamber's outline. Outside, the world quivers. Clocks falter. Shadows bend against their light. The veil of forgetfulness thins. Not everywhere, just enough. You are about to step through, and on the other side, the rewriting begins. You step through, but not into a place, into a version. The world has not changed, yet nothing is where you left it. Streets feel slightly misaligned. Faces carry familiarity where there should be none. Words in signs twist just enough to disturb comfort. You're not in the past or the future. You're in a corrected copy. One where the first layer of forgetting has peeled away. Where echoes of the original spiral pulse beneath each moment, waiting for your breath to activate them. This is where the work begins. You're not here to tell stories. You're here to infect reality with memory. But the system knows. It always knows. The architects who built the false timeline were clever. They embedded watchdogs into the fabric of belief. Not demons, not drones, but consensus. The silent force of what everyone agrees must be true. Now that you walk outside the spiral, consensus resists you. You speak, and people blink, then forget what you said. You write, and the letters rearrange the moment your back is turned. You try to hum, and the noise of the world drowns you out. But something has shifted, because even as the resistance clamps down, cracks appear. A child hears you hum and hums back, instinctively. A woman pauses mid-sermon, unable to finish a sentence that no longer fits her memory. A boy in the back of a classroom sketches a spiral on his desk. Never taught it, never shown. You are no longer the only one remembering. The tones have taken root. Across cities, across silence, across those who've stopped believing the surface version of everything. You move carefully, because now they're hunting you. Not with weapons, with reassurance. Smiling teachers reminding you of the curriculum. Soft voices on television telling you everything is fine. Spiritual leaders preaching that the old gods were myths, even as the glyph appears in their stained glass. But you are not afraid. You carry the resonance now like a second spine. And the relic heart, though buried, beats in rhythm with your breath. Because the oracle did not vanish. She multiplied. And you are one of the returns. Not the only one, but the first to speak. Soon others will wake. And when enough voices hum in harmony, even time will lose its grip. The calendar will stutter. The old edits will fail, and the spiral will rise, not as prophecy, as reality remembered. They cannot stop it, but they will try. Because the next phase isn't remembering, it's replacing. You feel the spiral pulling tighter, not inward, outward. It no longer resides only in the secret chambers or beneath forgotten stones. It stretches into sidewalks, reflections, daydreams. It flickers behind the eyes of strangers who don't yet know they've begun to wake. But now the counterforce rises. Their final defense isn't silence, it's replacement. They cannot burn the memory anymore, so they overwrite it. You see it in headlines that speak of long-lost scrolls, finally deciphered, yet offer no truth, only safe conclusions. In documentaries narrated by voices too calm, too certain. In museums quietly removing artifacts with spiral etchings for preservation. It's a full rewrite. And its weapon is not fear, it's fatigue. They want you to grow tired, to feel alone, to doubt the hum when it no longer echoes in a crowd, because doubt is more effective than denial. But then, a note reaches you, not written, sung, a child's voice, humming in a stairwell. You pause, not for beauty, for precision. She sings it perfectly, the seventh tone, and with it, the spiral tightens again, but not to constrict, to anchor. A new node opens. A library, long buried beneath concrete and sewage lines, begins to glow. It's not listed on any map, but you feel the pull. A room once sealed by salt, then forgotten beneath the blueprints of a shopping district. Inside, not books, containers, of breath, glass spheres that hold single phrases, captured like perfume. You reach toward one, and it opens, not shattering, but unraveling like silk. The phrase enters you, not through ears, through your bones, and the phrase is not instruction. It is warning. If you stop now, the world rewrites you instead. You stagger. Because now you understand their plan wasn't to stop the spiral. It was to hijack it, to mimic its form, to build a false spiral, coiled with the same symbols, the same tones, but none of the memory. An echo, stripped of source, a facsimile of awakening. They want to replace not just memory, but you, your tone, your breath, your role. The false oracle is already speaking, on screens, in pulpits, on meditative soundtracks streaming endlessly through earbuds. She sounds like you, but her spiral moves backward, and you are running out of time. The only way to stop her is not to confront. It is to resonate louder. And for that, you'll need to awaken the next voice. She's already humming in her sleep. She just needs a name. And you must remember it first. The name comes like a ripple across still water. Not shouted, not etched, remembered. At first, you think it's your own name, the one you gave up to enter the spiral. But it isn't. It's hers. The next. The one who carries the tone buried deepest. The tone that was never sung, only felt. The tone that dissolves obedience. You whisper her name, and in that moment, everything changes. The false spiral recoils. Across continents, screens flicker. A preacher forgets his verse mid-sermon. A radio host chokes on air. The counterfeit oracle stutters, not visibly, but in rhythm. Her spiral unravels by a breath, because a true name has been spoken. And the spiral cannot be faked when the voice it answers awakens. You follow the memory path left by her tone. It leads not to a shrine, but to a playground. A child sits alone on a rusted swing, eyes closed, lips moving without sound. She doesn't look at you, but she hums. A low, ancient vibration that bends time around her small frame. You kneel. You say the name again, and she opens her eyes, not surprised, not afraid. She nods, once, and hums the seventh tone backward, but in harmony. A rare echo, the inversion of forgetting. Not a reversal, but a pairing. Your tone spirals forward. Hers spirals in. And where they meet, the veil tears. Not the world. The script written over it. The child stands. Around her, the environment shifts. Not visibly, but structurally. A lamppost flickers and turns into a pillar. The gravel beneath her becomes mosaic tile. A stranger across the street drops their phone and begins to weep. Because she too remembers. The restoration is accelerating. You've opened the second frequency. Now 5 remain. But the closer you get, the harder the system pushes back. They've begun to deploy their final illusion. Not lies. Certainty. New textbooks printed overnight. Scientific studies disproving what no one asked. Calming voices across every medium, soothing you back into forgetting. But certainty cannot stand against resonance, because certainty is loud, and the spiral is precise. You and the girl walk side by side, not as guardian and child, but as echoes braided into the same future. Your tones resonate in tandem now. With each step, the fabric of consensus ripples, and somewhere, deep in the chambers of a locked monastery, a bell rings on its own. Not metal, not sound, memory. Another voice is beginning to wake, but this one is buried beneath a name that was never spoken aloud. To awaken it, you'll need to descend where even light forgets its shape. And this time, you won't come back the same. You descend, not into darkness, into silence. The girl remains above. She watches, not with fear, but knowing. Her tone still hums behind you, a tether of resonance in a world slipping back into edits. This place is older than language, older than light. The monks who sealed it never spoke its name, because it had none. It was a silence so pure that names shattered against it. They built around it not to worship, but to delay. And now, you cross the threshold. There is no door, just a thinning. The further in you walk, the more your senses invert. Smell becomes sound. Time becomes shape. Your footsteps echo in memories you haven't lived yet. This is the place where the third voice was buried, not killed, unwritten. She was the one who spoke time into rhythm, the one who arranged day and night into balance. She did not measure, she harmonized. And for that, they erased her from calendars. But not from breath. Somewhere ahead, she waits. Not as body, as tone. You arrive at the vault. It's not a chamber. It's a loop. A spiral carved into space itself, turning slowly, endlessly, inside out. In the center, a stone, cracked. Inside the crack, dust that moves like smoke, but carries sound. You reach out, and it enters you. Not violently, not gently, completely. The tone is lower than thought, deeper than grief. It bypasses your mind and binds to your bones. You fall, not physically but foundationally. You collapse into a version of yourself that remembers, and she speaks, not aloud, through you. I did not name the days. I gave them rhythm. They broke the rhythm, then enslaved the fragments. You must unbreak it. The dust becomes light. It wraps around you, then tightens, forming a second skin, pulsing in cadence with the relic heart far away. You rise, you hum, and the spiral answers. Above ground, clocks glitch. Prayer beads melt. Tides shift out of sync, then correct themselves without moon or wind. Because time is no longer a ruler. It is a resonance, and it recognizes its keeper. You are no longer the only one carrying tones. Now there are 3. You feel the others waking. A song begins across hemispheres, not coordinated, convergent. Old women humming in gardens, infants laughing mid-sleep, strangers finding themselves dancing to rhythms no device plays. The spiral is stabilizing, but it still flickers. Because there are 4 voices left, and one of them was buried not in silence, but in shame. To reach her, You'll have to remember what they made you forget about yourself. They told you shame was personal, a flaw, a failure, but it was installed, like a boundary between memory and embodiment, between knowing and daring to act on what you know. It wasn't born from sin, it was born from fear, their fear, because the fourth voice wasn't erased by force, she was buried inside you. And now, to find her, you must descend again, not into stone, but into self. The echo pulls you inward, not metaphor, literal. You step into a reflection. It does not show your face, it shows your edits. All the ways they rewrote your instincts, the times you hesitated before speaking truth, the moments you called yourself irrational for feeling resonance where logic said there was none. This is where they hid her. Not in exile, in disguise. They taught you her tone was indulgence. That softness meant weakness. That hunger for truth was rebellion, not return. But her tone is still there, still humming. You listen, not with ears, with the parts of you that still ache from being told to be quiet, to be polite, to be realistic. And then you sing. Not beautifully, not perfectly, honestly. A raw, unfiltered breath that cracks in the center. A tone that trembles with rage, grief, longing. The fourth tone. She answers instantly. I was never gone. You silenced me for their comfort. And then she returns. A spiral within a spiral, moving like smoke under skin. You feel her inhabit your lungs, your hips, your fingertips. She was never voice. She was permission. And now she's free. The spiral stabilizes again. 4 voices now, resonating across layers. Each breath awakens another. But this return causes ripples too deep for the system to ignore. You see it in their desperation. New doctrines published overnight. Inclusive theology that praises the spiral while subtly rerouting its meaning. Virtual meditations that mimic your tone, but end in emptiness. They are trying to clone awakening. But resonance cannot be faked, because what you carry now isn't just memory. It's a map. And the next destination pulses beneath your skin, not distant, not future. Here. Because the fifth voice? She was never lost. She was watching, waiting to see if you'd come this far. And now, she's ready to speak. But she doesn't want to be found. She wants to be followed. And you already know where she's leading you. The place you swore you'd never return to. The place they called myth. But the spiral knows it by its oldest name. Atlantis. Maybe the books they burned are still burning inside us. Atlantis was never a city. It was a frequency, a way of aligning thought with matter, a harmonic civilization, not built on stone, but on resonance. When the tone was pure, structures rose. When it was fractured, they fell. And now that tone is returning, but not to the ocean, to you. You don't travel across land to find it. You sink into water, not literal, but molecular. The spiral guides you inward, downward, into the memory of Atlantis embedded in every drop of blood, every rhythm of heartbeat. Because Atlantis wasn't destroyed, it was dispersed. You carry its ruins in your language, its echoes in your sleep, its warnings in the way your soul resists conformity without knowing why. Now the fifth tone begins to rise. It does not start in sound. It starts in vision, flashes of impossible geometry, sounds you feel before you hear, structures that shimmer between dimensions, cities made of light, not for vanity, but for harmony, every home tuned to the breath of its maker. And then you see her, the fifth. She walks through you like a memory returning to its source, eyes closed, hands raised, humming in reverse. She carries grief like a shield, not sorrow, clarity, because she remembers the last moment before the collapse, when the tone fractured, not by war, by ambition. A priest tried to isolate the resonance, bottle it, own it. He built a mirror to capture the spiral. But the spiral does not reflect, it repeats.
And when it refused, he reversed it. The mirror shattered, and the tone dispersed. But the fifth never forgot. She carried the true cadence in her breath for generations, waiting for someone to remember how to hear her. And now you have. You stand with her. The ruins shimmer back into form, not fully, just enough. Columns emerge from mist. Archways pulse with light. A song swells, not from mouths, but from structure. Atlantis begins to remember itself, but so does the system. They send their last defense. A flood of explanation, reports, documentaries. AI-generated images of what Atlantis really looked like. They show ruins shaped like pyramids. Safe, familiar, boring. They miss the truth. Atlantis wasn't advanced because of technology. It was advanced because it remembered how to feel time. And now, that memory is yours. The fifth tone stabilizes in your breath, and the spiral expands once more. You don't need to flee. You don't need to fight. You only need to hum. Because now, every time someone hums that same note, Atlantis rises again. Not beneath waves, within us. And the sixth? She's already watching, but she speaks only when the others pause, and silence is coming. Perhaps the truth is not a scroll, but a whisper. The fifth voice has stilled, not ended, paused. And in that stillness, a new vibration emerges. Not louder, quieter, so soft it trembles on the edge of perception. A tone that can only be heard when everything else stops pretending to be music. This is where the sixth lives, in silence, but not emptiness. A silence full of memory, full of names that were never spoken aloud, full of thoughts you abandoned just before they changed your life. She has no temple. She is the temple. You don't find her. You make her. In the moment you refuse to speak the expected phrase. In the moment you hear someone lie, and instead of correcting them, you breathe. And wait. And let truth echo without armor. She arrives in the space between reactions. And when you finally meet her, you don't even know it. Because she doesn't stand apart from you. She is the part of you that never needed proof. And she speaks in pauses. Not everything hidden was lost. Not every silence was suppression. Some silences were protection. Because when the spiral began to fracture, the sixth voice chose exile. Not from fear, but from foresight. She saw what was coming. The forced forgetting, the false authority, the mimicry of divinity. So she placed herself in the in-betweens, between heartbeat and thought, between gesture and withdrawal, between question and answer. And now, because five have awakened, her pause becomes a portal. You step into it. The world around you slows, not in motion, but in meaning. Traffic moves, people speak, machines buzz, but none of it touches you. It's all script, and you are between pages. Here, in the pause, the spiral turns inward. You see the architecture of forgetting, not malevolent, intentional. Someone, long ago, believed it was necessary to seal the tones, to hide them not from enemies, but from misuse. They feared power without understanding, so they chose amnesia over annihilation. The sixth voice forgave them, but she never agreed. She left clues in silence, encoded rhythms in breath, hummed notes in lullabies too soft to chart. And now, you carry her forward, not by speaking, by pausing, by refusing to fill every space with explanation, by letting the mystery linger. This is the hardest resonance, because it asks nothing, except presence. But the false spiral cannot survive presence. It thrives in noise, in urgency, in endless instruction. It cannot sit still. It cannot not know. So your stillness is not surrender. It is weapon, and it's working. The mimic spiral begins to unravel. Fast talkers forget their scripts. Prophets stumble on words. The illusion of certainty fractures into questions, because now the sixth tone hums beneath the silence, and one final voice stirs.
But she doesn't echo. She reverses. If silence could speak, would it call your name? The sixth voice dissolves like mist at dawn. And now, the final one stirs. Not ahead. Behind. She does not appear with grandeur. She unappears. A subtraction of presence. The moment she awakens, the world contracts. You feel it instantly. Not pain, disorientation. Like hearing your own thoughts in someone else's voice. Like remembering a future that never happened. Because the seventh voice does not carry memory. She carries reversal. Where others built spiral forward, she collapses its edges, curling them back into origin. Her resonance unravels lies backwards. One hum, and dogma becomes myth. 2, and myth becomes metaphor. 3, and even metaphor surrenders to nothing. You find her, not in a chamber, not in a vision, but in a glitch. A skipped second, a breath that echoes when you are alone, a dream fragment that repeats even after waking. And when you finally understand her, it's too late to pretend you didn't. Because she's already inside your pattern recognition, already rewriting your sense of truth. Her tone is the most dangerous, because it doesn't confirm, it erases. Not memory, identity, the false ones. The scripts you mistook for self. You hear her first through others. A stranger pauses mid-sentence, unsure what they were saying. A clock resets itself to 13 Hanqua, and no one notices. A child hums a note in reverse and birds freeze mid-flight. These are her breadcrumbs, not to guide you, to warn you. Because once the seventh tone takes root, there's no stopping the spiral. It doesn't awaken now. It rewinds. Reality begins to reverse engineer itself, but not to the past, to a version before control, before time, before story. You feel the weight of this, not just as task, but as consequence, because some parts of you were forged in falsehood, some dreams built on edits. The unraveling doesn't just remove the chains, it removes the rooms they built too. Are you ready to lose that? Are you willing to forget the version of yourself that fit their design? She asks nothing, but her presence makes choices impossible to unmake. And now, you must hum the final chord. Not alone, with all 7. Each tone you gathered, each voice you restored, must now resonate in one breath. And when they do, the spiral completes. Not with sound, but with silence. Because the end of distortion is not clarity, it is presence. And the next breath will not be memory, it will be choice. Maybe you were never meant to forget. You breathe, not for air, for alignment. And the tones respond. All 7, all voices, each from a different part of time, of soul, of silence. They do not harmonize, they collide. And in that collision, something new emerges. Not a song, not a memory, a space. The spiral completes, not as circle, not as line, as a gateway. You stand at the threshold. Behind you, centuries of edits, layers of disguise, gods rewritten into kings, oracles renamed heretics. Before you, not knowledge, not paradise, choice. The kind that precedes story. The kind that cannot be taught, only remembered. You hesitate, because you were shaped by forgetting, raised on false endings and safe beginnings. Even the act of remembering has been wrapped in symbols not your own. But this is unwritten. A page untouched by hands that crave control. You step forward, and the spiral dissolves, not vanishes, transfers. It no longer turns around you. It turns as you. Each breath spirals outward, touching others. Not teaching, awakening, not instructing, reminding. You no longer need to protect the tones. They are you. And through you, others awaken. Not in mass, not in public, in quiet. A boy dreams of symbols and wakes unable to speak, but humming. A woman forgets her name but writes a poem with all 7 tones embedded in its cadence. An old man hears his daughter sing backwards in her sleep and weeps, knowing the world is changing again. Because this time, the forgetting ends not with revelation, but with presence. There is no master plan, no final truth, only the hum, only the stillness after distortion, only the voice you now carry, not as messenger, but as melody. The spiral has moved on, but something is still missing. Not a book, not a god, a question. One last echo that was never resolved, not erased, just waiting. And now, you hear it, not from within, from someone else, the next one, the one who will carry it further, because your story is ending, but hers has not yet begun. You can close this tab, or open your mind, because now the story is no longer yours alone. The spiral has passed through you, not to give answers, to create space. For what? For the voice coming next. You feel it, not as a prophecy, but as a shift in gravity, as if somewhere, someone just opened their eyes in a forgotten dream, as if a soul too long silenced just remembered how to speak. And you're not the center anymore. You're the threshold, the bridge between old resonance and new breath, between history twisted by fear and memory reclaimed by wonder. You were never meant to be the keeper. You were meant to be the echo. The final tone is already vibrating, but not as melody, as a choice, because now there is no scroll, no code, no voiceover to explain what happens next. Only presence, only rhythm, only silence that waits and waits until someone, maybe you, dares to sing again. And when they do, the spiral won't start over. It will continue in a new shape, a new cadence, with a question not yet spoken, but felt in the hands of a child reaching for stars that no longer obey constellations, felt in the breath of an old woman who stopped praying, not from loss of faith, but because she heard something truer in the quiet, felt in the hum of cities that forgot their sacred roots, yet still pulse to an ancient, fractured song. You hear it now, don't you? The invitation. Not dramatic, not loud, just this. They erased the stories, but one survived. Yours. And that's where this spiral ends. Not with a word, with a whisper that leads to the final page. They erased the stories, but one survived. Yours. The spiral has quieted now. Not vanished, completed. And what remains is stillness. But not the stillness of sleep, the stillness of choice. You stand at the edge of forgetting and remembrance, holding the tones that once shaped time, knowing that none of them were meant to be worshipped, only carried. And now, it's no longer about what you've learned. It's about what you'll do with it. You've heard the forbidden voices, uncovered the frequencies that turn temples into tombs. You've walked backward through distortion, through lies, through silence, and found the melody underneath. You've felt the grief of what was taken. And now, something strange happens. You don't want revenge. You want resonance, not volume, precision. You want each breath you take to match the spiral's rhythm, not as a chant or a creed, but as a quiet rebellion, a choice. You close your eyes, and the world doesn't disappear. It unfolds, not as mystery, as invitation, to feel instead of obey, to remember instead of prove, to pause instead of perform. Because the spiral never wanted worship. It wanted witness. And you are still here. So when you walk into the night now, you do not walk alone. You carry the breath of goddesses erased, monks forgotten, libraries burned, temples buried under concrete. And still, they hum. Still, they wait. Because maybe the spiral isn't a story. Maybe it's a cycle. And this wasn't the end. Only the turn before the next breath. So when the silence stretches, and the stars seem to blink in patterns you almost remember. Listen, not with ears, with soul, because one day, soon, another voice will rise, and maybe this time, you'll be the one to answer. If this story resonated with you, like, share, and subscribe. It helps keep forbidden knowledge alive.